It is a treat for me to announce our Peace Educator of the Year award. Every year, the Advisory Committee of the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies selects an Austin Community College educator to receive our Peace Educator Award. There are many, many deserving, but only one can get the award every year. I have the honor to introduce this year's recipient, my colleague and friend, Dr. Marcus McCorder. Marcus currently serves as chair of the drama department, where he teaches voice, acting, and theater appreciation. He holds a BFA in directing from Howard University, an MA in theater from the University of North Texas, and a PhD in performance as public practice from the University of Texas at Austin. He sits on the advisory board for the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies, the ACC TV network, and New Manifest Theater Company. Professionally active as a stage director in Central Texas, his recent credits include works at Vortex Theater Company, Southwestern University, Hyde Park Theater, and of course ACC, Penfold Theater Company, and Austin Playhouse. But that's not all. Quoting from words of his colleagues, this is a man who cares about each human that he comes into contact with. Work is a labor of love, and he effortlessly motivates others in the art of his craft while making sure that each person knows they're not alone. He's one of those rare individuals who slows down and makes sure that everyone feels heard. Marcus is a visionary, and his vision extends and even transcends beyond any limits that some may place on community college drama departments. He's created a department that is engaged in the community, connected to the theater industry, and focuses on the difference theater makes in the lives of its participants and audiences. It's no surprise or consequence that Marcus has included the importance of peace and conflict studies in his vision. He encourages his faculty to become a part of its curriculum and to engage the students in meaningful ways that will undoubtedly impact their lives and the awareness of their responsibility as empathetic citizens and human beings. Marcus has been with us from very early on, and in fact was part of the group of faculty who in 2018 attended Notre Dame's Teaching Peace in the 21st Century Institute. He exemplifies how you can take your job and do peace building with it. Congratulations, Marcus.
I don't have to talk now, do I?
Yes.
The first part of that, thank you. The first part of that, words about me, I sent in, it's like, what do you do? Well, here's my CV. And I was fine. And then I started hearing stuff that I hadn't written, and I felt the tears welling up. So thank you again. When Shirin came to me, gosh, what was that, 2014 when I started this work? Ooh, getting old. Number one, I had black hair all over. But I was floored. I was like, Shirin, this is a brilliant idea. Not only because of the work involved and how important peace and conflict studies is in our world and in our local community, but I was floored because why had no one else thought of this? So I thank you for your vision and your brilliance in putting this together. I immediately said yes, because this is what we do in the arts. We build communities, we collaborate, we teach and practice empathy. And so for me, it was a no-brainer. And the excitement that our faculty in the department shared just kind of spoke to that this is a practice that is bread and butter of what we do in the arts. And I think it's important. It has always been important. It will continue to be important. And I'm just thrilled and honored and grateful to have been a part of bringing this formally to ACC. It aligns with our mission, and that makes me happy. So thank you again.
Okay.
I do with my notes. Oh, here. You know, Giti talked about what happened today, the bombing in Iran. And I keep thinking how in the midst of all the misery that's going on in the world, we can have these pockets of really happy and fulfilling, meaningful times together. So I really appreciate all of you for being here. Okay, so our next session, we wanted to move away from the panel format, and we have an in conversation kind of TV show format. So let me introduce who's going to be in conversation with Dr. George Lopez and with each other. You've already heard about George, so I won't tell you about him again. But let me invite the others. Is Sam here? All right, awesome. Okay, so Dr. Sam Greer is ACC's Director of Employer Outreach and Experiential Learning. In this capacity, he acts as a liaison between the college's academic programs and employers and oversees all internships, apprenticeships, and service learning programs. He's been in this or related capacities for the last 10 years. Sam has a BA in economics from UT, MA in history from Texas State, and a PhD in education administration from UT Austin. Before joining us at ACC, he worked as a high school social studies teacher, a principal and superintendent, and he's been married to his wife, Marcy, for 35 years and has 3 daughters. Thank you, Sam, for being here. All right, Brians. Brians Edwards is a training specialist senior with the Austin Police Training Academy. She designs and facilitates the APD Community Connect and Engagement programs, as well as the Mindfulness and Resilience program for cadets. In addition, she's actively involved in wellness within the department and is the lead researcher for Austin Police Jiu-Jitsu. I did not know that. After enrolling and dropping out of several colleges, Brian's completed her associates here at ACC in Peace and Conflict Studies and bachelor's degrees in 2022. She is currently pursuing dual master's degrees in criminal justice and interdisciplinary studies and was recently awarded an International Association of Chiefs of Police Community Trust Initiative Fellowship. Really happy to have Brian's here. And we get to hear from Marcus again. He didn't disappear, did he? No. He has to earn that award. Look, he's not letting it go. All right, and finally, my colleague and friend, Dr. Grant Potts. Grant is a professor of philosophy, religion, and humanities at Austin Community College. He's been active with the development of peace and conflict studies at ACC for close to a decade and teaches an introduction to comparative religion class with a peace and conflict studies focus, and has helped facilitate the Conflict Transformation Academy with us through the center, our Center for Peace and Conflict Studies. The primary focus of his current work is promoting religious literacy and interreligious understanding as a public good, both within ACC and promoting curriculum and program level reform to assure all community college students have access to the benefits of liberal education. In Iran, they say "ab roshaniye," which means water is light. Yeah, so it's a good omen. It's a good omen, yeah. He is on the board of directors of Great Questions. We're talking about Grant again. Great Questions Foundation, where he serves as treasurer. And it's an educational nonprofit that offers faculty development and support programs nationwide to community college faculty to refocus high enrollment, required general education courses around the discussion-based study of transformative texts that have been identified by community college faculty as particularly suitable for early academic engagement. And I think I'm joining as well. So a reminder that because this is being live streamed, we need to all speak into a microphone. So we may have to pass them around. Okay, so we're envisioning this as kind of an informal, maybe semi-formal conversation among all of us. And I'll start with some questions, but anyone here can ask questions and direct it to others, and you all will be able to ask us questions in a little bit. The focus is on peace jobs. If you were here earlier this morning, we talked about careers in peace and peace building, and that's what we're talking about now. So I'm going to ask George the first question. George, how do you define a peace job? And what is the difference between a peace job and the traditional conflict resolution jobs that we think of, like being a diplomat, being a facilitator for restorative justice, being a mediator, and so on?
It's on? It's on. First of all, thank you. I feel a little overexposed here. Good colleagues here, and I get the first question, and I already knocked over my water. So I'm not sure I want to agree with the phrasing of the question, because there's peace jobs like diplomat, et cetera, mediator, and there's other jobs. I think I tend to see it in a classification of 3 or 4 types of peace jobs. One is folks who intentionally decided, I'm going to go get the right education that one needs for this path, called mediator or diplomat or community relations specialist, or accompanist of my local police and crisis management. That's all of those are peace jobs. Then there's all these wonderful other jobs, most of whom in service work, which goes from lawyers to doctors to teachers to social workers to psychologists to child therapists, etc. All of those involve dealing with humans in varied situations that often find them that we're dealing with, or us and them, in a kind of conflict situation or a challenge to justice or issues like that, where having had the kinds of courses that you all are offering and concentrations in peace studies gives somebody the skills, but also the perspective to decide that, that I'm going to make this job a peace job in addition to the things that I'm doing. Or it's clear to me that part of my role is to be a peace and reconciler as a social worker or as a lawyer. And then the third, and I think this is very important for people plotting what they're going to do with their life, is there's an unusual number of opportunities in the volunteer sector. Some of that's in centers for community conflict resolution, where you might be an intake worker or you might be involved in some trainings, etc. So the volunteer dynamic is very important. And the last one I'd put in there is as family members, particularly raising children. I mean, I think that how to help young people from the age of birth on to navigate a world where so many of the people they will meet want to other people and engage in practices that will foment conflict. It's important to give them these kinds of skills, and our programs have a way of doing that. So thanks for letting me start off with that, but I'm delighted to be with these other colleagues and hear what they have to say.
Thank you. Okay, so to the rest of the folks here, what does it mean to be a peace builder in your job? And how did you get started thinking of yourself as a peace builder? Or like, do you give yourself that honor of like calling yourself self-love, self-compassion, peace builder?
I would say until I got the invitation to come back and do this, I hadn't thought about what I do on a daily basis as being a peace-building job. But the programs that I run are called Community Connect and Community Engagement. And the focus of those projects is really letting cadets interact with community members and build those empathetic relationships, which seems like it falls under the category. So I would say this is revelatory to me in how I think about the work that I do, but it is also entirely embedded in everything that I want to see come out of these programs.
I find it so interesting that as someone who came to us interested in studying peace and conflict studies, and you sought out like using peace and conflict studies in law enforcement, you still didn't think of yourself as being a peace builder.
It's a complicated space to work in. I was absolutely fascinated by the program, really happy to get my associates in peace and conflict studies. But I definitely came at it from when I originally went to school. I wanted to study conflict. I was an international science major, wanted to study conflict, did my study abroad in Egypt, just absolutely fascinated by how we construct the narrative around conflict and what resolutions to those conflicts might look like. Had no idea peace and conflict studies was a field. And when I eventually made my way to Austin and to ACC, to be very honest, the goal was to get the degree. Whatever the degree was, finish the degree, and then I can move on. But I was so interested in what I was learning and had worked at the police department as a 911 call taker. And then 2020 happened, and I had stopped working at 911, but all of the conversation nationally, internationally, was about policing and all of the issues with policing. So I had an in. I knew police officers. I had seen some really good police officers in Austin. So what was the problem? And what was the way that we could solve this problem? So because of your class, because of the work here at ACC, because of the contacts I had previously, I started sending really annoying emails. And it turns out being really annoying can open some doors sometimes. But my role ends up being much more of a bridge, being able to see the very community, there are issues, we need to solve them, and still being able to speak genuinely and honestly, and more importantly, listen to police officers and their perspective. So it is peace building, but so much of what I do is negotiations on every single day, or interpretation, right? Every single day, that I guess I hadn't stopped to think about what else to call it. I'm willing to stop talking now. Yes.
I've never really thought of myself as a peacemaker. That doesn't sound right. A peacemaker. But I brag that I have the two most difficult jobs on the planet. I'm a teacher and I'm a parent. And I say those are the most important jobs on the planet because if you get either of those wrong, you screw up the rest of the world. Not just your children, not just your students, but they go out and spread whatever you get wrong. So I take it very seriously. And I think I'm with Brienne's in that I never thought of myself as peace and conflict studies person, but I've always been interested in conflict. In high school, if there was a fight, I would run and watch, right? It's interesting. And I think it's, when we first started talking about how does drama and theater intersect with peace and conflict studies, my first thought was, well, particularly in the craft of acting, we study conflict and we look at ways to accelerate it, to intensify it, and we look at the root causes. And you go to any acting classroom and it's what is my motivation? That goes to what do you want? So if you have two people in a scene and they're fighting, it's because each of them wants something different. And there's an obstacle in the middle. And I think from there, I can kind of pan back and then look at, okay, let's look at the opposite. If there's a conflict either between my children or between my students, I can look at it and say, okay, what do you want? What do you want? Is there a way for us either to give you both what you need, which is never, right? Or to make everybody 50% happy? And so I think that's kind of where I come into that conversation about peace and conflict.
I don't think I think of myself as a peace builder. At best I think of myself as someone who attempts to be a conflict understander, right? But I also, that is in purpose to trying to transform that conflict so that people, one, don't get hurt when there's conflict, because that's like my big priority, I think, is both physical and non-physical violence and preventing that violence and harm from coming out of a conflict situation. And then two, to try to redirect that violent energy to do something good with it, right? To bring something out of it. And yeah, I do that all the time in my job. That just managing a classroom, especially a discussion-based classroom, a big part of what we want is to have students be in good conversations with each other with principled disagreement, right? And be able to walk out of that having learned from each other and not having felt like they dominated or were violated by that disagreement. So that's always going to be a part of that. I'd like to say that, as a scholar of religion, I became interested in peace and conflict because, religion is such a source of conflict and also such a source of conflict transformation. And that's true. But I think what got me here was my first job out of college. When I got out of college with my religion and English BA, I went and worked for the bank. And I worked as a customer service agent, right? And my job was resolving 19 conflicts an hour on the phone of people who had a conflict with the bank, right? That could be, you lost $5,000, where is it? Or what is this $30 fee, right? And I was partisan to the bank, right? So I'm an agent of the bank, so it's a little weird. But at least when I was first there, which was a small regional bank, this was in the 90s when we still had those, we were really taught, hey, your job is to really help. You're an advocate for the customer. You're there to help resolve the conflict with the bank. Here's the boundaries. This is how little money we're actually going to give you to do it. So but that was there. And I really took that to heart. Now, we got taken over by Chase, and then I was told my job is to make as much money for the bank as possible, and I quit my job. So but that's embedded in me. That experience at that very customer service oriented job, I think that's the origins of some of my peace orientation as much as anything else.
I also don't think of myself as a peace builder, but as a director at the college, one of my functions is both to build our employer base. We have over 1,400 registered employers for our internship programs, but also to defend our students against abusive labor practices, right? And so one of my functions is to get in the middle of that so that the faculty don't have to, and that the student doesn't have to. Although self-advocacy is part of what I'm going to talk about in a minute, being a peace builder sometimes has to do with educating our employer partners about expectations, but frankly, sometimes it has to do with being willing to end the relationship, and just say that this isn't a fit. If you're not going to change these practices, I have a high standard of duty. I have a duty of care to our students, and I'll fire the employer and move the student to somebody else who I've specifically negotiated with. We also have emergency placements for students who have they don't have a car, they need something on a bus line, or they're a single parent and they only have coverage during certain parts of the day, or they have a felony conviction, and I have to find a second chance employer for that. And that one is one where that's where I am a peace builder, and I have to really establish relationships with those employers and build a level of trust to give the student a second chance. And, okay, maybe they're not handling the cash register this time, but, but whatever. It depends on the specifics of the case, and it just has to do with establishing rapport with the individual people. And that's what this is. That is building peace and really establishing a relationship. And frankly, it's become part of the ACC brand that our employers really trust us, and they trust, our faculty vet the students before we send them out to make sure it's an appropriate placement, etc. But so it goes both ways. So that's one of the things that I do. As far as the other thing is that every one of us who work at the college, we're all peace builders. That's part of our training and just our general understanding. If you don't, you're going to get squawked at by somebody somewhere. So, anyway, so the college really is one of the most wonderful places to work, and we have universal values, I'm delighted to say. So, anyway, let's have your next question.
Thank you, everyone. I don't dispute that the college is a wonderful place to work. That's why I've been here for 26 years. A very long time. Yeah, thank you. At the same time, I don't think we are taught peace building. We are taught how to, nobody is. Who grows up?
Shirin. It's probably conflict avoidance, just because you just got to keep your head low.
Yeah, just be nice. And we do actually, Grant and I are part of the group that teaches the Conflict Transformation Academy, and our very humble mission, a goal at the very beginning, was to change the culture of conflict in the college. Just kidding, it's not a humble, it's a huge thing, but we wanted to change. We still do want to change, and we have more people on board to be facilitators and work with us, but we're not there. We're working toward it. We value it. I think the college values it, but we need to start that kind of teaching from the parenting. Some of you talked about being parents. And that was my own intro to peace studies. As a psychologist, I was interested in violence prevention. Started with bullying, and then saw that bullying was happening to children at their own homes too, not just at schools, through my research. So pivoted to some parenting work, and then took the opportunity to join the U.S. Institute of Peace and learn about what a peace and conflict studies program at a community college could look like. We need to get there. Yeah. All right, so let's see, what question? They're all really good questions. What advice to anyone? What advice do you have for people, especially college students, who are interested in peace jobs? What is a good way for them to get started incorporating peace studies and conflict studies into their career? You already alluded to volunteering, starting with volunteering, but maybe something more specific too.
I think we need to keep in mind that almost any kind of service learning opportunity will make some of the concepts we're talking with you all about in classes come alive. Sometimes they'll smack you right up the side of the head in ways that even our best teaching might not initially been able to help you with. but I think it's the lived experience of a sensitivity now because of the things you've learned in class. What am I looking for? Is this the first time I now, in the midst of this confrontation with somebody, when I thought I was just here to help at this job, where I'm really challenged to listen to the other side, where I'm really challenged to think about what's the roots from which this is coming from this person, and am I going to use good verbal communication to try to elicit that? If I've got to talk, am I going to use iMessages? Am I not going to argue with this person the way I used to with my siblings, saying, I know what you mean? And we don't do that. We don't attribute to people what they're about. We elicit from them what they're actually about and how we can get to interact and meet them where they are. So I think that the first layer of advice I'd give is go out and get your hands dirty and be involved in this long enough that 25 years later you'll look back and say, oh my goodness, they let me out there to try to help people? Oh, I did so terrible. As all of us have done in any number of things. You've got a number of faculty here who are pretty veteran. I'm embarrassed the way I think I taught in the 1980s, but I had to start somewhere. And we all do in these jobs. The other thing I think to keep in mind is a long view. They tell us now that you folks who are in your 20s are likely to have 3 types of careers or 3 different careers at 10 to 15 years a shot. Maybe it's butcher, baker, candlestick maker, but you're going to have different opportunities, and preparing yourself for a baseline of what you want to do in peace building. Get ready to just pack that bag of tricks up and take it wherever life gives you an opportunity, like when they consolidate your bank and all of a sudden you say, when the tough gets going, go back to graduate school or something like that.
Okay.
Dovetailing off of what you said, I would say find what makes you curious. Find what you're willing to ask endless questions about, because that's how you build those relationships and build that trust to then, and the other part would be peace build everywhere, right? This is part of your SAT model is if we're changing the structure of everything around us, then everywhere you go, you have the opportunity to peace build.
Rehearse, practice. From an arts perspective, I always, at least mention to students, hey, have you thought about teaching? Not just being a teacher in a classroom, but there's a huge market for, is this dirty word, market? I'm sorry. Huge market for teaching artists. So I advocate saying, okay, put together some modular workshops, because you never know who's going to call you. Police department might call you and say, hey, can you come in and do de-escalation workshops? Corporate might call you in and say, hey, can you do some team building, some collaboration workshops? So put those together ahead of time, and then practice. Also from my field, I think it's really important, and same, George, you touched on this. Practice listening, because listening is essential. And in acting classes, this is what a good actor does. You listen and you react. And it helps with those communication skills and really getting to the root of what's going on in a situation. Why is this person on the phone with me so angry? Well, if you don't listen to them, you're never going to know. And then also for my field, improv, because those 3 careers that you're going to face, there's going to be some dancing in the very beginning. You're going to have to stay on your toes, and as you listen, react and practice empathy.
So I'm going to go against conventional wisdom here at ACC and say stop worrying about your job. But I mean that in a particular way, because I think instead of worrying about what job you're going to get, worry about the work you want to do, right? So that's the first thing. Think about the work you want to do. And so I think about a piece work. And that can help you think then about what are the types of jobs that could do that. But think about the work you want to do. And then secondly, I'm going to echo what George said, which is then that gives you a sense of, say, all right, what are the service learning classes that help me do that kind of work? What are the internship opportunities that help me do that kind of work? And I think through that you discover both the skills and the opportunities in the industries where you can do the work you want to do. And I think that's so thinking of it that way. And then third, take advantage of the gift you have in your general education curriculum. A lot of times you look at that and you think, oh, these are just these required classes, why do I have to take them? They are there to provide the kind of comprehensive education of yourself as a human being that allows you to be a peacemaker, that allows you to do that kind of work. So take advantage of them. One, take those classes enthusiastically, pick the ones that really speak to you. But secondly, always think about them on your own. Maybe journal, maybe reflect for yourself. How is what I'm getting in this class, even if no one else recognizing it, how does this fit into that work I want to do?
I want to add to some of what everybody has said so far, but particularly kind of circling back to what Brian said about how sending lots of emails and being annoying can pay off. Find the people, send those emails. You don't know, just tell people what you're interested in. And then you'll find someone who finds your email delightful and inspiring instead of annoying, and they will respond to you, right? Yeah. But really, as a student, and maybe even today, not so much today, but till recently, I was reluctant to tell people what I was interested in or what I wanted or what I aspired to because that's too much. Holding myself back. Don't hold back. Tell everybody. Even if you have a half-baked idea of what you're interested in. You take a class in government, you get really interested in something, tell anyone who will listen to you about it. You don't know who's going to say, take a look at that. I'll connect you to that person. I'll connect you to that internship or service learning opportunity. Just put yourself out there until you find the person who finds you delightful.
Mm-hmm. And I would like to add to that and onto what Grant and George both said. My job is inherently transactional, so it's exactly what Shirin was just talking about. And right now we have 750 service learning students. We are looking to dramatically expand and develop an infrastructure around volunteerism. And really adding support for students who want to reach out into the community. And of course, we have about 400 interns loose on the city in various capacities today. And so if a student is interested in any of these things, speak to your faculty. And the faculty have resources, even if they don't know it, right? They can come to our office, the Office of Experiential Learning, and we'll help. We will reach out and organize something for you. So that's our function here at the college. So would be delighted to help with that.
I want to tell students, don't apologize for taking your professor's times. It's our job. I get so many emails like, I'm so sorry to bother you. It's like, no, this is my job. So ask, bug us. You're not bugging us.
You have no idea how excited we get.
And that's why they pay us.
Yeah, right. That's all I had to say. Oh, I'm sorry. We, as teachers, we get really excited when students ask us questions. We just do. Why? We're nerds. We love our subject. We love our field. A lot of us are old, so it's like I got to do something with what I've learned from my mistakes, and I'd love to pass it on to you. So yeah, we are eager to answer those questions.
I'd like to open this up to all of you to see if you have questions, comments for anybody on the panel. Bring it on. Maddie, do you have a mic? Make us happy. Make us happy. Ask us questions.
So I'll just share a little bit of my history of what got me here today. And what I advise to my students is be kind of eclectic. In other words, my path had some relationships, but all over the place. Started in psychology, going on to grad school, first interested in justice. Then I got interested in, biases and then understanding conflict and did some mediation and ended up going to law school after my doctorate and whatever. And I just kept building on lots of different interests. So the bigger, the more interdisciplinary, the bigger picture that I've developed for myself, the more it's easier for me to see opportunities that you can do things in this area. And so I say no matter what area you're going into, always constantly be that lifelong learner that wants to find ways of connecting with different disciplines and finding ways not just be so maybe siloed into I've got to focus on the word peace, but how with my interest can I keep learning and building and opening breadth besides depth of what I do and find ways of increasing those conversations. So I just want to throw that idea out there.
Thank you.
To add to that, I think interdisciplinary invokes change and innovation. So in whatever area you are passionate about, when you bring different careers and different lenses to your passion, you innovate and you create something that was not there before that is needed. And so that's
Thank you. Just a quick question. I often have conversations with students who are having a conflict with a professor or a boss, so a relationship where there's a power dynamic, and I feel like there's often a common theme is how do I bring this concern forward with someone that can impact my future? So just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Okay, well, I will tackle that one. One of the things that we are trying, that we're really trying to expand general knowledge of is the National Association of Colleges and Employers Career Competencies. This is the artist formerly known as soft skills, but this is where like huge companies like General Electric and Boeing and Ford Motor Company got together with University of Michigan and Stanford, et cetera. And it has to do with the skills that they want every single college graduate to have, regardless of major and regardless of degree level. This is what they want all of their entry-level employees to have, and you're going to see a trend about peace and conflict in these. Communication, clearly, teamwork and collaboration, critical reasoning, the career development, career professional development, meaning managing your own career, lifelong learner, professionalism, and that has to do with resolving conflict professionally. Leadership is how you actually can collaborate, even from a support position, but to solve problems for your employer. And then two that were added after we all went to school. One is digital literacy, and the other one is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which we now have to call intercultural fluency because of our legislature. But the point is that's not quite everything. And from an employer's perspective, that one had to do with they were just tired of like, dang, Fred, you can't say that at work, right? So you have to go to a Saturday HR seminar or some such. But it has to do, when I spoke to CEOs at tech firms, and they would say, look out at my workforce. Yeah, Eric, what do you see? Well, Eric, they're all white guys between the age of 25 and 32. That's right. I'm missing business opportunities out there because of the lack of diversity. And they need to know how to work with all sorts of people and rise above that. And so and resolving conflict at every single point is part of their own professional development, but is also just part of the smooth functioning of any employment situation. And so, and power differentials are inherent to those sorts of systems. And so they have to learn their own institutional culture and how to work within it. And you also have to learn how to work with your superior. If you're having an issue, you have to be able to advocate for yourself. That's the communication piece. That's part of leadership. That is a part of your own professional development. You have to learn how to advocate for yourself. And that is, of course, going to be resolving conflict is inherent. I mean, there are certain inherent conflicts in life. Landlord-tenant, management labor. These are inherent conflicts that it doesn't matter how smooth the relationship is, there is an inherent conflict built into the relationship, and you have to learn how to navigate those. So that is something that all of these employers have told all of the colleges, we need you to inculcate your students with these skills to be able to maneuver into the workplace. And they're expecting it of all of our students. So that's something, it is now built into, it's part of the internship evaluation matrix, but it's also built into all of our service learning projects. The faculty are aware of, and it does, George is right. Service learning ticks every one of those boxes, just about, depending on the type of project. So that is something that we are really looking at expanding significantly throughout the college. It has quadrupled in the last 2 years, and we're looking at a significant expansion from there. So.
Thank you, Sam. You answered one of the questions that was upcoming, as well. So thank you for that. The question was, what are the skills employers are looking for that can intersect with peace studies and conflict studies? And those are I forget what the new name is, was soft skills. What was it called? Core competencies.
See asterisk at bottom of page, previously answered.
Yeah, previous name. But also in response to Kyrie's question about students' conflicts with their faculty, with other staff, the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies has an answer for everything. We have plans for everything. So different areas of the college have actually asked us to do training in conflict transformation and peace building type of workshop, conflict transformation academy for all of their students. And because there are logistical issues in that, the reason I bring that up is because in that training, we directly address issues of power differences, which is inherent in all conflicts, particularly between faculty, students, and so on. The problems are that, we do have a course, but it's a psychology elective, and it doesn't fit into every student's degree plan, so they can't get financial aid for that. But we might be able to do micro-credentialing or something like that to just have them deal with that.
I have a request for that.
Yeah?
I'm working with the Career Center to develop modules about those competencies that we're talking about. Let's include that.
Let's talk. Okay. Okay. The other thing is that we did do a needs assessment out of our center to see what kinds of conflicts people at college experience in which at least one party in that conflict is a student. And based on that, what we are proposing is to have a conflict consultation office. So students, they don't have to make it like an official complaint. Students said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go the official route. Just come and say, I have this conflict. What do I do with it? And a lot of times, if they had the skills, if they were able to get help from someone who had those skills, they'd be able to communicate and not have a conflict escalate. There's so many things that could be solved by talking the right way, communicating about the conflict in the right way. But yeah, those power differences can be toxic in conflicts.
I think one thing I'd say to address your question, Kyrie, is that if you have power, don't think your good intentions are going to take that off the table, right? And I think for especially a lot of faculty, that's a hard pill to swallow. They love their students, and they think they're doing what's best for their students, and they can't see how the inherent power differential that you're controlling the future of that student through the grading is shaping your interactions, whether you like it or not. I don't know if that's helpful to the student who's on the other side of that differential, but I think as people who are often on the side with the power, it's something we have to remind ourselves however much we love our students, however much we care about them, however much we say yes, like all the things we want to do, we also have power, and that's not going away. And you can't just erase that through some techniques. You can attend to it. You can account for it. You can do your best to try to mitigate it, but you have to accept that reality.
Yeah, amen to that. I mean, as a department chair, we see it a lot, right? Conflict between students and teachers, between team members, and how do we negotiate that? I think one of the most important things that we can do in positions of, if you can call middle management leadership, right, is to remember that we're in a learning community, and that's one of the things I think it can help to mitigate. If it's just you versus that student, and even that language versus, then the power is going to be there, and the power dynamic is going to play into it. If you can start to triangulate, bring in other voices, even, and we've experimented with things like at the beginning of the semester. It's just logistically difficult, but sitting with students first day of class, okay, let's talk about syllabus. What do you want to change? What do you want to see on here? And we have, our institutional and departmental and state mandated and accreditation standards that we have to hit, but there's a lot of flexibility. And if from the very beginning, as you found and create this learning community, you are including student voices in the creation of that place, they're going to feel a little bit more empowered. Not going to mitigate it completely, but they're going to feel a little bit more empowered. And then when conflicts arise, we approach it the same way. Okay, there's a conflict here. Let's deal with this, as opposed to I'm going to deal with this and fix it.
As a student, I'm just taking notes at this point. Finals are coming up. This is very exciting to me. Thank you. But seriously, the police department obviously has very strict hierarchies. There is no building together when you have conflict with somebody above you. And as a civilian in the police department, it's just built into every every interaction. I find personally that being very professional and respectful will mitigate a lot of the potential for miscommunication. And then there are just people that you're going to be in conflict with. I mean, I hate to say it, I would like to see all of those conflicts go away. But I think it's just true. There are people you're going to be in conflict with, and I think building yourself a community of people that you feel supported by when you can't avoid those interactions has some value, and just making sure that you are within yourself behaving in the way that you would want to see somebody else behave.
Yeah, and kind of back to what you said, Marcus, too. When you start the relationship with your students on a really personal, like human to human level, as opposed to I am the know-it-all and you are, I'm going to tell you. You kind of build the framework that we can work through things together. When you start off the semester I'm not sure, syllabus may be negotiable, but classroom norms are negotiable. Deadlines are, I know this is controversial, but assignment deadlines are suggestions. My students, you don't listen to that, right? But no, but they know, this is, my class is only a part of their lives. They have other things going on in their life. So, You let me know you couldn't do it. When can you do it? Okay, do it then. It's not like any time is fine. But so using those kinds of relationships, like building relationship patterns in class, hopefully will allow them to come to me if they have a problem, or they can work with each other to come to me.
Okay, because what you just described was communication, collaboration, and professionalism by talking to you about the issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so again, you've already, this is how all faculty are already utilizing those skills, and inculcating those skills that they can take into the workplace later. But again, there's still an inherent, as Grant pointed out, there's still an inherent class differential between faculty and student, just as there is between management and labor when they get to their next stage, and they have to learn how to navigate that. So,
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
in our workshops, conflict transformation workshops, which we do with faculty and staff and administrators at ACC, when we talk about power, what we talk about is that if you are the higher powered person in a conflict, you have a lot more responsibility, because you've got to recognize that. And like Grant said, your good intentions and good heart and good goals don't negate the fact that you are the higher powered person in that relationship, in that conflict. So George, I have a question for you as someone who has been in, you've designed programs, you've designed the whole degree program, you've worked at, higher levels, nationally and internationally. So for those in leadership positions, what advice would you give them if they were interested in implementing conflict transformation practices in their organizations, having a kind of climate or culture that was based on the principles of conflict transformation and peace building?
I think when we begin to work in an organizational setting and with that level of leadership, I'd spend a lot of time saying, assuming they invited a comment like this, what's your goals? What's working for you? What dilemma or disaffection with people around you are you having an issue with? In other words, it's very important with people in a power dynamic, very different from hopefully us and with our students in the classroom, where you've got to get them to try to express what they really want. And also, I think, to probe. Okay, thank you. That's your first answer. Now, can you please tell me what you really feel? Or to be able to say, if you've identified these things and you gave us, meaning our team, the ability to just sit around lunchrooms and various other things and talk to people about what's working and what's not working, what do you think we'd hear? And if we hear something different than what you think is the dilemma here, what are you prepared to hear from us? I don't suspect any of us have trouble understanding when you're dealing with somebody in a leadership position when they actually don't want to hear from you, they don't want to be asked questions, and they don't want to share with you anything, because now you've become part of the problem by talking with them about whether or not there's a problem. So, I think it demands some sensitivity. It demands any number of things. Really, one of the worst situations I had with this was very long ago, when I was surprised to get a local company to call and say, we understand your peace studies program does a lot of peace studies workshops and conflict resolution, we're having a lot of conflict with, the brass and the foreman and the workers. And I had never done anything in an industrial setting. That's not my thing. But what do you run for a day? We're going to give everybody a paid Thursday, free lunch. You come in, you've got 6 hours at their time. What do you want to do? And I laid it out, and they were a little appalled by the fact that some of it was spent in time that they were actually working with one another. And I was asking of foremen and leaderships to play the role of the workers and made the workers leadership. They thought that was the craziest thing. But we did it all, arrived at some principles that they'd work on. And then a week later, I read in the local paper that the company had been bought out and was going to be dramatically changed. And what they had really wanted was somebody to come in and build the conflict resistance skills of some of the people, because they didn't, as leadership, want to be honest with them that there were bad times coming. And instead of saying we're all in it together, gee, we feel bad for you, workers are going to be out of a job. And I felt like I was kicked in the stomach about 3 times. I'd never had such a visceral reaction to that. And so I think it's very important to, if we're coming to our interaction with people honestly, to try to test out, am I dealing with an authentic request and question here? Or is it somebody who's, covering their butt, or somebody who was told you better bring in somebody to talk about conflict, but they don't really give a whatever? And I think that's important.
There. Yeah, we're on. So I was just in Memphis for a conference, and I went to the National Civil Rights Museum, which is a superb museum if you ever have an opportunity to visit it. And I was struck, this is echoing off your note, at how much, as you walk through that and you're exposed to, the events of the civil rights era, the language of peace was used as a weapon against civil rights advocates, and how much, people who were calling for justice were positioned as disruptors, as people who were creating violence, as people who were fighting peace. So I think it is important to always, I think we can't think about peace without justice. And I think, we forget to say that because it's so embedded in our conversations that we forget that that a lot of times that isn't in the foreground of what people are thinking. And two, to be attentive to the way peace and the desire for peace and the desire to resolve conflict can actually be a mask for perpetuating oppression and perpetuating violence.
Let me just bounce off of that, if you don't mind. I mean, that's excellent. I mean, this is right out of the text of the beginning of King's letter from the Birmingham jail, right? They say we were outside agitators. We came to foment violence because we engaged in our demonstrations, but we're here because injustice is here. And I think that gets back to an earlier point and a question raised this morning about evil and injustice and in structures. There's nothing in our development of conflict transformation skills that stops us from calling injustice injustice, but also not being surprised when that's pulled inside out, because you guys, you all lied there on the street and you made the police drag you away and beat you until you would get into the van. So much for moral and practical agency, right? I think that's very, very important. Thank you for that.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Listening to y'all just now, I realized that the power elite might co-opt peace building at a performative level. Is there any danger of that, in your opinion?
Absolutely. Well, and again, if you just look at it from my perspective in employer relations, to George's point, what makes a bad employee? Well, if the employee is a victim of an abusive labor practice, just self-advocacy is can be construed as a troublemaker, and of course, and then you just get into the entire concept of unionization and union breaking, etc. But that's something again that we're trying to educate our students to be able to self-advocate, to recognize in that particular case abusive labor practices, but really any kind of conflict, and how to resolve it, and having the resilience and the ability to resolve the conflict by recognizing the tools that are available. And that could be some sort of infrastructural tool like a grievance solution of some sort. But sometimes you have to go to the mats. You have to lie on the ground and get hauled off. And so or in some cases just leave. This is not this situation is not redeemable. So anyway, yeah, to your point, absolutely, we're humans. We live in human systems. Anything can be co-opted.
Yes, I think that can happen. But, and I'm sorry, but I somewhat disagree. The reason my position was created at all is because of Resolution 66 as mandated by City Council. I have a job because of it, but we also have these programs because of it. And because of that opportunity, I can build something that's real. I can build something that makes a real difference. So I don't have to accept the limitations or the definitions that have been mandated for us. There's still room to work there, especially if you bring that curiosity and that ability to build relationships with others. I think there's always room to do the good work.
Yes, I've never been one to think that because something is performed, it's not real. We see this all the time. I mean, there's a whole tradition in theater of the oppressed, theater for development, where it is by performing, by pretending, by playing that we are something else, that we actualize that it becomes baked into who we are. And I think the inverse is true as well. When people with bad intentions perform at peace and justice, I think that's dangerous because we begin to shift and transform those definitions into something a little bit more nefarious. So,
yes. Well, I mean, I think it's important that we always recognize that. Dan, you often help us focus on that, and I always appreciate that as part of your role in the college, and that's always a real danger. And it's not just the intention of the elite actors, the power elite. It's the structure of being the power elite that leads to that. And so it's tough. And some, like, even as I've been in higher positions in the hierarchy at ACC, I find myself leaning into those structures of power when I'm not attentive to it. It's slippery. So yeah, I think we have to always be attentive to that. But I also think, like, kind of echoing off the both of you, what I found on the other side is sometimes, even if someone's totally performing, you can take advantage of that performance and basically call their bluff and say, all right, well, let's do that then, right? And sometimes you can slip in real transformation when you do that. Sometimes you can get shut down, right? But sometimes you can slip in real transformation, which is what I hear you saying as well.
Let's also be real about the difference between positional power and implicit power, and the kinds of identities we have that give us more or less of that implicit power, right? So not every department chair gets the same level of power in this organization or in any organization. Our identities are part of how people see us, regardless of what position we have, what level we are.
One of the things that I have learned, sometimes the hard way, but before I was a director at ACC about 20 plus years ago, I was a superintendent of schools, and I had a parent come in, and he was not well educated, and he was absolutely furious, and he was just screaming at the top of his lungs, and I had to listen through that. It would have been so easy to just ignore it about the guys just performing, right? But I had to listen through all of that and find the real grievance, which was that he had a special needs child who was not receiving the special education care that he needed. And but he was not going about it the right way, but that wasn't relevant. I had to, my function was to, okay, let's get this resolved. Tell you what, you're pretty hot right now. Come back tomorrow. I'm going to have the school psychologist. We're going to develop an individual education plan, 504, everything that you need. I will provide everything that you need. But I had to listen. And sometimes that's really hard. And that was the first part of resolving the conflict. If we were just in a bar or something, that would have, that could have easily devolved into fisticuffs, right? But it wasn't. And so it was, he did not handle it well. He was not performing in the way that was expected, but he had a legitimate grievance. And I was the one in a position of authority. And actually, it was after I'd done my PhD at UT, and I did do critical race theory. And I did learn, and I'm exactly who that's for, by the way, because I was a white male in a position of authority. And I had to recognize how I could potentially be contributing to institutional racism. And there it sat right in front of me in the chair in my office. And so I had to learn my way through that. And that was the valuable lesson to me. As the authority figure, I had to learn to listen. And everyone does have an equal perspective that we need to learn to listen through. So that was my life lesson.
Thank you. I want to do a quick check with my team. Do we end at 2:00?
2:15.
2:15. Okay, thank you. There is a question over there. Yeah.
I appreciate all the stories, and so I was kind of thinking about this self-advocacy piece of it. Excuse me. And so a lot is placed onto our students, and obviously the director, if you working with companies, can kind of be a middleman to make sure that our students are treated well and our students are learning these skills. And so at what point, or even in the classroom, should the burden not be on the student to be their own advocate? What's the role of a third party, a peer, an ally, a middle person that's not part of the conflict directly, but recognizes that the student experiencing something, or if you have examples of times when you weren't exactly the person in the conflict, but you knew that it would be unfair to the person experiencing the conflict, or maybe because of those power differences, that it's an unfair burden for them to be their own advocate, and they need someone else to advocate on their behalf.
Unfortunately, that was routine, right? Knock wood, I did not have any of that this spring semester. That was great, but previously I have. And again, it has to do with the nature. There is a dual class disadvantage for an intern. One, they're a student, and two, they're an intern. They're an employee, right? And so they're at the bottom of two power infrastructures. And so the key is to what Grant and Shirin both said: has to do with the relationship with their faculty member. They've got to be able to tell somebody, right? I'm having a problem. And if they will tell somebody, we can't help if we don't know, right? So they do have to self-advocate. But once they do, well, then we have an infrastructure in place that we can fix it. And we do not let that. I mean, again, that's our function, is to make sure that the students have a very positive first experience in their field of study, that they can succeed, and so that it propels them on their journey. And so we do correct those, and they're rare. Again, I had 400 this semester and had 0 problems. Not what it's not every semester, but the student does have to self-advocate. That is every human on planet Earth. You do have to self-advocate in that situation, or if we don't know, we cannot help. However, the first place they need to go and self-advocate is to their employer, is to their supervisor. You know, hey, you didn't tell me I was going to have to work on Saturdays, right? I have my kid on Saturday. I can't work on Saturday. So they have to do that first. Once it starts, you know, if it can't get resolved, then we do get involved. But yeah, self-advocacy, again, that's that communication piece I was talking about earlier. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is when we use the term self-advocacy, it leans into all these ideals we have of, you know, being a self-made person who can take care of your own stuff. But I don't think that's what we're asking for when we're saying we want our students to develop self-advocacy. I think what we're asking for is more what you're saying, which is how do we help students recognize this is a moment when I need to go get an advocate, right? And how to get that advocate that will help me navigate this. If I'm going to court, I'm getting a lawyer, right? You know, and that's self-advocacy. That's not, I'm going to go there without the experience of this complex legal structure and try to make my case against someone who has it, right? So I think part of it is we need to, and maybe maybe the term self-advocacy is we need something else to get at what we're talking about, which is really getting that ability to recognize, hey, there's a problem that I need help with. I need to go get that help, not there's a problem that I need to take care of myself.
Right. That being a victim and fleeing is not conflict resolution, right? You have to be able to recognize it and speak up. You have to recognize that there is an issue and speak up about it to someone.
Yeah, I think the key is to someone, though. Yeah, right? Because it may be beyond, you may not even feel safe to speak up, to self-advocate. But there should be somebody that you can get support from.
Hi, first I just want to say props to speaking today. It's a lot more nerve-wracking when you're holding a microphone speaking publicly. Common themes I've heard are about communication and collaboration, and to build on what was just asked and what you were speaking on. Earlier, Ms. Breens-Edwards spoke about being a bridge between the police department and the community. And right now you're talking about advocacy. And I'm kind of curious about, in regards to listening, right, and hearing people, do you think it's easier to be a conduit to sort of communicate how people feel and what their voice is to folks where there's inherently going to be conflict versus them having conversations directly, right? Community having conversations directly with the police who may be in their neighborhood policing, and it doesn't look like what the community wants it to look like, or the police are received the way that they would hope or is different than how they had intended or expected when they started. Does having that third party using their relationships between the two parties help that advocacy for each side and kind of building that peace, right, and bridging the conflict?
That's an interesting question. I think it depends where you are in the situation. I think having people speak directly to each other is always a good idea, or I want to think that it's always a good idea, but there needs to be a level of trust and that feeling of security that you're talking about. People need to feel safe to have those direct conversations. So one of the things that we do is use nonprofit organizations. We bring them in and we ask them to help us understand what the populations they serve are experiencing and what some of the issues that they see working with the police department. Because a sexual assault survivor may not want to come in and talk to police cadets about how police officers handled their interview poorly. If somebody does, then I'm happy to create the space for them. Having that firsthand account for cadets is really important. They can really start to empathize in a completely different way when they can have that direct connection. But we have to make sure that people have trust that they will be treated well in that situation. And I would say specifically the person with less power, in that case the victim, feels like they will be treated well, and they have the psychological and emotional safety to have those kinds of conversations.
I'm not an expert, but I have worked with Brienne's over at the police department, and I think the work they're doing is important and significant. And it's not a one-way conversation, right? Even as a third person in the room, as a facilitator, I'm learning from those cadets. I'm gathering information from them. I think also to your question, I think just as human beings, we're social creatures. And I think as peace and conflict advocates, peace and conflict, we defend that space where there is trust. I think that's kind of our charge. Whenever you can get two people who are in conflict into a space together, I think it's up to those of us who value peace and conflict studies is to defend that space, that this is going to be safe. We do want you to have this conversation. My name is Bennett, so I'm not in it, but I'm going to defend everybody's right and capacity to utilize this space. And I think when you get, it can work nefariously as well. But I think when you can get a majority of people in the space to say, okay, we're going to stay chill, we're going to talk about this, we're going to work towards a solution instead of working towards winning, each of us winning, I think it can be super productive. That can be subverted, back to Dan's original question about this performance of things. If the majority of people in the room say, hey, let's lean over towards this side, then I think it can become problematic. But I think as students of peace and conflict, we should again defend this space. We should be champions of this space.
I'm inherently a middleman. I am that third party that you talk about right there. And sometimes it is not appropriate. Again, I mentioned that an intern is at the lower side of two different power structures. And if they're having a conflict with an employer, which involves an abusive labor practice of some sort of misunderstanding that the student is unhappy about, it's not always healthy. I mean, it's a lot easier to have a third party, either the professor or myself, resolve that. Working with the student, they could be right there, but it's to Grant's point, is that I would be the advocate, right? That because there is no power differential between me and the employer. We're peers, and so there can, there's no negotiation there. They're just merely education about expectation, and so it's not always appropriate to put, if you will, the victim and perp in the same room. It has to do with educating, and most of the employment issues that I deal with are resolved. I just look, it was a misunderstanding, but this particular situation, again, she's a single parent, and she only has coverage during this time, etc. If this isn't going to work for you, let me know. I'll find somebody else, and I'll move her to a place that is that's more accommodating, for example. But So it's not always the self-advocacy that I'm talking about has to do with just telling somebody that is on your side of the scale. So thanks for the question.
George, do you have something you want to add?
As in at 212, I'm the final comment. As in that. I'm going to go back to something Grant said about the basic courses, and finding in them the skill sets that they're trying to teach. Since you've been kind enough to let me spend the day with you, I will say that I went to a small Catholic liberal arts college in Western New York, essentially to play baseball, basketball, and meet girls. I did 2 out of 3 pretty well, but I was as Brooklyn as you could get. So in my first day in English literature class, when they asked us to talk about the book was required reading to come into that course, I said, hey, you know what? Let me tell you, this guy, James Joyce, I think he's got some things going for him here. And the wonderful English prof kind of looked down the table and said, thank you, Mr. Lopez. Can you come see me after class? I really want to talk about your insights. And I thought, okay, I'm going to write my mother immediately and say, they love me here. I thought I'd be a star, and I am, right? So she sits me down and she says, I think from some of the written things you did for the reports coming in, you've got a lot of talent. But we have a public speaking class that's usually for juniors and especially people that are going to go into business. I want you to go down the hall with me and see if we can get you in there, probably next semester. And I thought, oh, gee, thanks. That's pretty good. Thank you. There's no more helpful thing to me than I've ever done in peace or any other work or being a successful faculty person than that particular required course. Who would have thunk it? I certainly didn't, but the people knew. To read, to write, to do the arithmetic, and to learn how to speak. All of this is part of being a peace builder. Thank you for letting me share that.
All right. Maddie, can you tell us what's happening next, please? You're not on.
Yeah. So after this, we're going to be heading upstairs for the arts performances in the recital hall. So for those on the live broadcast, we're going to cut for a little bit as we transition over into that space. And we will have volunteers to lead us right upstairs, but it's directly above us. So we'll be doing that, and then we'll be transitioning back in here after that for our final panel.
Do we have a coffee break in between, I think?
Yes.
I think we do. Live streaming, folks, you will be able to view the dance performances as well. After we cut, we go up there, and then live stream will resume. All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for this great conversation.